So a little wrap up about what I'm calling DevOps, right? DevOps is sort of a new category because, like we said, when you're doing shrink wrap software, the idea that operations and maintenance would be your problem was generally pretty alien. This is something that's come across really because software as a service has taken off so much, where as a developer, you cannot be completely ignorant of the operational things that come up in terms of performance and security, and vice versa. So what are some standard pitfalls to avoid as you go forward? Well, premature optimization is not the root of all evil, but it's pretty close. It's great that speed is a feature that users expect. It's great that we've done all this work on how to speed things up. But remember that until you've actually measured your application, you're pretty much otherwise just guessing at what you would want to speed up. So we've looked at systems like New Relic, which is a great way to do monitoring of all kinds of things in your application. They also write a pretty good blog that's just sort of good, helpful advice. But roughly speaking, if you're not monitoring it, then either it's broken or you don't know if it's slow or not. So don't think about how could I make this run faster unless A, you've written it really idiotically to run slowly, right? Like you've written it pathologically badly. If you've got an n+1 query problem, that's just pathologically bad. You should fix those things. But if you're concerned about whether some query is fast or slow compared to some other query, wait until you go to production and see where the problems actually are before you try to prematurely optimize. There's a standard I don't know, a fallacy, I guess, that because we're doing cloud computing and we have these 3-tier apps where you can scale the tiers, that sort of relieves us of having to think about scalability. I think what the message of this chunk of the course is that there are some things you can do to help yourself stay in a tier where other people worry about scalability up to a certain point. But we know the database is particularly hard to scale. And even if you do scale it, you still want to get as many expensive operations as you can out of the way because you care about response time. So all of these techniques both help you get good performance and stay in the past tier longer. And if you find that you outgrow that tier, you're going to just be solving these same problems, but on your own. So all of the same concepts, same types of measurements, all of that same stuff applies. You still have to think about caching. You still have to design your app so that the unit of cacheability matches what's convenient to serve. So don't combine, for example, filter and non-filter behaviors in the same controller action, because that doesn't allow you to selectively decide which entire actions to cache. That level of thinking is important whether you're going to be running in the past here or whether you end up having to rebuild some of this stuff yourself. Another standard kind of argument that if we're building a small site that has a limited user audience is, why would anybody want to come after my little site? People don't store credit cards there. I have no sensitive information that anybody could monetize. But most of the time, the hackers aren't necessarily after your site or your data. They're after your users. Increasingly, there's a really fascinating emerging trend, disturbing but fascinating, I guess, that there's an entire underground economy in essentially selling access to users' machines. So what that means is if I can get you to visit a site, and by virtue of visiting that site, you become the victim of a drive-by download of some malware, I can monetize that. I'm not even the guy who wants to install the malware. I'm just a broker. I'm selling, for X number of dollars, I will sell you 10,000 attack vectors that you can just start harvesting users that happen to visit those sites. So your site is actually not interesting in and of itself. It's interesting as a vector for spreading a disease, if you will. And that's the real reason you need to worry about this stuff. If you stay current with the best practices, if you sort of stay on top of the notifications that your PaaS provider sends you, PaaS providers, by and large, do a very good job of dealing with infrastructure stuff. Even though incidents do happen, when they do happen, they tend to get addressed very quickly by people who really know what they're doing. So another reason that I think on the whole, it's a benefit that most developers can take advantage of sites like Heroku and AWS rather than having to manually build all that infrastructure themselves. Prepare for catastrophe. You have to assume that at some point your site will be compromised and or your database will be compromised, and you have to be able to restore without losing very much data. Depending on who you're serving, it may be that having sort of the previous night's backup might be enough. Maybe a few times a day might be enough. But have a plan, because it's absolutely going to happen. In fact, I think an interesting extreme of this is at Netflix, which is Amazon's largest customer. And Netflix owns almost none of their own infrastructure. All of the movie streaming that they do is all served off of Amazon's compute cloud. So not only do they prepare for catastrophes, they actually induce artificial disasters in their virtual data centers to make sure that they always are practicing the recovery procedures. It's like the equivalent of periodically crashing a plane so that you know how to recover from crashing the plane. And it's not a simulated thing. Like, they actually create a real emergency. I'm hoping to get a televised interview with Adrian Cockcroft, who's a director of engineering there and has a great story about this stuff. But way back in 2000, 7 or 8, when Amazon Web Services had this very big outage that lasted for over a day, and it affected thousands of companies that were running their sites on AWS, Netflix was almost unaffected. And it was in part because they had built out this infrastructure that not only had redundancy, but they had been practicing all the processes that would be used in case such a disaster ever happened. So there's no substitute for that. So last question to wrap up our discussion of DevOps. Your user is sporadically complaining that your site is slow, yet you've got New Relic monitoring turned on, and they're reporting that the traffic levels aren't anything unusual, CPU utilization is nothing unusual. What is the most likely cause? There's not enough dynos on Heroku, so requests are getting stalled at the front end. There are some queries that are unusually slow, maybe because there's other apps sharing your shared database, so requests are getting stalled at the back end. Some views are taking unusually long to render, so maybe they're getting stalled in the browser because of JavaScript, or not enough information to determine.